Hey, what's going on, everybody? Robert Phoenix here, coming at you live from Fredericksburg, Texas. It is 9:04 in this lovely blue sky morning. Yes, indeed. We have six people who have now entered into the inner sanctum of your early morning cup of truth. A double shot of truth with perhaps a small little layer of foam cream on top, maybe to make it go down just a little bit easier. Okay, so we've got nine peeps. How is it going out there? Am I going to have to get in and do the remote chat? Let me see if I can make that happen, just in case. Because I always love to stay in touch with what you guys are thinking, talking about, sharing. I love the dialogue. So let's get into this and let's see what we got going on here. Bit of a controversial topic today. Slightly controversial. It's okay. It's all right. We can talk about things that are controversial. The last time I checked, it is still it's still possible. Last time I checked, hold on a second there. Okay. Last time I checked, it's still possible that we can discuss things. All right, let's see what we got here. Where's the chat? Okay, we got there we go. I can see you guys now. Yes. I took a shower this morning, slicked my hair back, ready to rock and roll. Controversial? No. All right, so we got in the chat room: Beth, Charles, Anna. There's Paulette, Ani, Chris and Steve, SK, PC, 333, Joanna. Good morning, Joanna. Rhonda, Sandy Winterfield. Hello, Sandy, and of course, Lynn. Did you do last night? No, I'm still working on the platform. I got a really great offer from Paulette, who's actually in the chat room, and we're going to be working together and providing a very nice little bonus / perk for people who are going to donate to the new platform. Hey, Shari, what's happening? So this is going to be a really cool thing, and I'll have more information on it as I roll it out. I'm going to be working on it today. I just got to get all the pieces together. A lot of pieces. Hi, Marion. Marion from Dublin. All right. My roots. That's where my mother's family is from. Ireland. Not Dublin, but Ireland. So let's get into this today. Very controversial topic, so to speak. Representative from Detroit, Ilhan Omar, spoke out against the Israel lobby, also known as AIPAC or AIPAC, depending upon how you sort of twist those vowels around. And essentially, she came out and said that the Israel lobby is incredibly powerful. It influences foreign policy, perhaps even domestic policy. And it is, and politicians are beholden to the Israeli lobby due to the fact that, there are Benjamins involved, money involved. And she was very, very quickly labeled anti-Semitic. And Trump wasted no time in denouncing Ilhan Omar, and not only saying that she's anti-Semitic, but she should step down. Now, of course, we know that Trump has one foot in Jerusalem and one foot in Washington, D.C. I'm not exaggerating it. It's true. I mean, he's the only president that decided that the embassy was going to move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Of course, this is one step closer to fulfilling the prophecy of the third temple, and the third temple being a central theme to the end times fantasy, the end times scenario, which is propped up and propagated by the Zionist Christian church. By the way, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but when Trump was giving his roundtable talk about the border, about the wall, about where he's going to get the money, that that the 1.85 billion. I find it really hard to believe, by the way, that $1.85 billion will only buy 55 miles of a wall. Are you kidding me? $1.85 billion only gets you 55 miles. Now, I'm not saying I'm necessarily for the wall or against it. I think there's pros and cons to each side, to be honest with you. I think from a security measure, it's probably not a bad thing. Is it going to be a end all and be all to, is it going to answer the quote unquote security needs completely? Doubtful. Just like how criminals find their way to guns that are not licensed in their name, drugs will find their way into this country. People will find their way into this country. But will it cut down a certain number? Yeah, quite possibly. The thing that I'm more concerned about is that the wall is also something to keep us from leaving and getting out. That's the part that I'm a little concerned about. Like the wall becomes, because it's interesting because people use this analogy. Well, walls work for prisons. They use that analogy to sell this idea of the wall because it keeps the bad people out. Okay, well, you can use the same analogy as the wall becoming this kind of iron curtain around the country and thus making potentially this country a prison. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm trying to see this thing from a couple of different perspectives. Okay, but anyway, he was talking about the wall. He was answering these questions, and to his right, on his right shoulder, there was a very kind of attractive looking woman. Like, well, who is that woman? That's Paula White, and that's Trump's spiritual advisor. So she was really like on his right shoulder, like the angel on his right shoulder. So just a little aside, and that's who Trump has aligned himself with. He's aligned himself with evangelical Christian Zionists, and I've said that he is going through a quote unquote religious conversion. I do believe that that's true, but I also believe that he's getting this religious conversion lock, stock, and barrel with the other component, which is the nation state of Israel and the religious and prophetic sort of chords that are tied into that as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about, or at least ask the question, can we criticize a foreign government? Because this is what Ilhan Omar did. She criticized a foreign government, and she hit the third rail. She hit the third rail. Now, it's interesting because in many cases, we've seen this, where on the left, like say, for instance, Jamel Hill. Jamel Hill is an African-American woman. She is decidedly anti-Trump. She's decidedly sort of pro-woke, and she used her platform at ESPN to continually and consistently bang that drum. And she banged it so hard, well, that it got her moved out of ESPN. They basically fired Jamel Hill. But it was a soft fire, and she landed over at the Atlantic, which is a magazine. So it wasn't as if Jamel Hill was tarred, feathered, and blackballed from being able to be a journalist or have a Twitter account. She was able to get away with a lot. She was able to say a lot for a long period of time. And this is clearly the effect of being, number one, I'm going to say it, and it may be controversial, being a woman. Number two, being an African-American woman. You can get away with saying certain things that other people can't say. Like if I were to say some of those things, I'd be shouted down. It's just the way it is. There's a hierarchy, right? There's a hierarchy. Now, Ilhan Omar is kind of in that same camp, and she's a Muslim. And we've seen now that you cannot criticize Islam. You cannot criticize being a Muslim. Even Trump has really walked that back. You don't, Trump had he made a very big deal out of extreme Muslim activity, extreme Islam. So the early part of his campaign, and perhaps like the first 6 to 8 months of his political plank in Washington, was using the extreme versions of Islam as talking points, and not just talking points, but policy points as well. He doesn't say that anymore. If you watch him, he's like left that behind. So there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, he's probably like trying to create some other kind of velocity or some other kind of momentum instead of targeting the other. But I also think he was probably told to lay off. And criticizing Islam or criticizing Muslims has been kind of a sacred cow. You just don't do it now. And if you do, you can get banned from Twitter. You can get banned from Facebook. And we've seen this happen. So not only is she's not African-American, she's Somalian. So she's a refugee who happens to be black, who happens to be a woman, who happens to be a Muslim. Just think of that. That's a 5-point plan. She's a refugee. We love our refugees in this country. Come on, let's open up our borders and bring them all in. It's all good. We love them. Love them. She's a woman. She's not African American, but she is black. And she's a Muslim. There's a 4-point plan. You would think she would be unassailable based on those 4 points, because those 4 groups. The only thing that she's leaving out is that she's not LGBTQ, although apparently she did marry her brother, and specifically for citizenship issues, right? I mean, I don't think there was an incestuous relationship with her brother. I think it was really just like, let's get him in the country. So it is kind of a little weird, right? I mean, but it doesn't really qualify. However, that is coming up, and I would not be surprised to see if this woman actually steps down, or there's something that takes place based on the fact that she did marry her brother in order to get him into the country. That might be an issue. They may find another piece of her personal past or history that might be used against her. I mean, clearly, this is a time where maybe she had whiteface. Maybe she had whiteface on. Oh, look at her. She's in whiteface. Right? I don't think that happened. And I don't think I've never seen, although Dave Chappelle did do whiteface, right? Dave Chappelle, when he had a show, there was he imitated, he did an impersonation of a white news anchor, which I thought was hilarious. That was whiteface. Okay? Just saying. Anyway, she's somebody who theoretically can't she's kind of bulletproof. And she's on the left, and the left basically can say whatever they want. Oh no, not now. She criticized AIPAC as a lobby that influences domestic and foreign policy, and she was immediately branded anti-Semitic. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds on what qualifies somebody as being Semitic. I could have a 2-hour show on that, and that would be controversial as well. But what I do want to comment on is the fact that she is talking about something that's political, that's connected to a foreign lobby, that's connected to this government, and you could take the anti-Semitic out of it and just look at it from a hermetically sealed kind of observation or tweet. Was that part of a retweet? And is it wrong for us to be able to criticize a foreign government? We criticize Russia all the time. Russia has become the scapegoat and the dartboard for the last couple of years, and being tied, of course, to Trump and the so-called Russia scandal. It's okay to criticize Russia. I'm not sure it's always okay to criticize China. And you don't hear a lot of criticism about China, but Russia clearly gets a lot of criticism. So I'm trying to think if there are any other countries. Oh, North Korea. North Korea gets criticized, but not so much anymore. It's almost as if these countries have been set up in some ways to be the sort of the scapegoats and to take the heat, on a policy level, so that other countries don't have to. Okay, there's always going to be some bad guy in the world. There's always going to be some villain. There's always going to be some government that is oppressive. Now Maduro is part of that. Now he's taking the heat. And I'm not going to get into Venezuela today. That's not what this show's about. But what I'm trying to put together and show you is that there are these shadow. It's like the projection of the shadow onto other governments or onto other figures who are connected either to the governments or they're connected to groups inside the government that become the scapegoat, perhaps for criticizing other governments or looking at the value of what other governments bring to the table, and if they are involved in a process that is systemic, right? So this is what we're looking at here. And does she have the right to do that? Of course she does. But she can't criticize the one government that this country and this administration is tied to. And what we've seen now, and this is a brilliant, brilliant stroke, is that if you criticize Israel, then you are on the left, because the left is pro-BDS. The left might have some. This is an interesting kind of component, because what's happening, you're seeing like Ilhan Omar and Ocasio-Cortez and Tlaib. I'm not advocating them or advocating their political stances, but what I'm just making an observation with them is that they're millennials. They're Pluto and Scorpio millennials. And I believe that the Pluto and Scorpio millennials have a very different relationship with this idea of who and what Israel is and how they relate to this country. And I think that is a problem. That's a problem moving forward because of this tightly knit relationship between these two countries. So they're going to squash it as quickly as possible. But what we've seen is this really fascinating arc weld between making America great again and Zionism. I'm just being honest, right? If you criticize Israel, somehow you're a traitor to this idea and concept of making America great again, because we cannot do that. We can't criticize our partner in just about everything we're doing in the world. And of course, there's the religious entanglement and the prophetic entanglement and the revelatory entanglement. And there are a lot of people in this country, especially south of the Mason-Dixon line, that have a very strong relationship to this idea that Israel must exist so the second coming can occur. Ironically, they love Israel so much that when Jesus returns, he's going to come back and say, hey, listen, you guys got to convert this time. And if you don't convert, you're out of here. I'm smoting you to the fires of hell. They haven't quite worked that one out yet, right? So my feeling is and I've seen this begin to occur, is that the Christian Zionists will morph that piece of revelation over to Islam. And it's going to be about the Muslims converting and not the Pharisees, right, or the heretics on the other side of that Abrahamic faith line. So anyway, we can see this taking place now. And if you criticize Israel, you're criticizing America, essentially. How can you do that? I said I listen to talk radio a lot, and I listen to these guys come on and defend this position. And they don't talk about the USS Liberty. They don't talk about any number of, like, well, for instance, it's on the record that Israel takes a lot of our technological trade secrets, and they wind up selling them to China. They take our jets and they sell them to other countries. And this is on top of the $3 billion a year that we give them. That they don't take into account that there was a guy by the name of Jonathan Pollard who basically gave away some of our greatest secrets and spent time in prison as a result of that. And through the intense effort of the Israeli lobby, including AIPAC, he was finally able to get released. He was a traitor. He was an absolute traitor. Okay, so nobody ever talks about that, but they have this, you know, kind of blind faith and allegiance. And by God, you don't cross that line, because if you do, then you're going to get the religious ire, you're going to get the patriotic ire, and you're a traitor that's associated with the left. And so I've talked about this before. And what's being created is what's called the pincer effect. Okay, and this is a tactic that is used in war. It is a war tactic. So what I'm sort of integrating here is the idea that this is a psychological war, okay, and not a physical war. But the pincer effect has one side come from this position and one side come from this position, and they basically squeeze the center, and they've got nowhere to go, and then ultimately they're surrounded. So the pincer effect on the right is that, okay, here we go, we're going to make America great again, and we have to have an allegiance to a specific country, and their goals are intertwined with our goals, and together we're stronger. And if you stray from that path, well, guess what? You're over on the left. And on the left side, you can say, okay, well, you know, I'm down with the fact that you guys want to question, you know, who we do business with in the world, whether it's Russia or whether it's perhaps the nation state of Israel, which is what Ilhan Omar suggested. If you're down with that, right, you're on the left. But if you're not down with whatever else the left is down with, well, you're kind of screwed too. Like, well, you know, I'm okay with questioning our relationship with foreign governments, no matter what or who the foreign government is. But I'm not down with, you know, infanticide, and I'm not down with the new Green Deal, the new Green Nightmare. I'm not down with a number of things that are associated with that side. But what's happening is that we're being asked to pick sides, right? You're either on this side or you're on this side. And the pincer effect starts to take place. And what people don't do or cannot do is sometimes find themselves in the middle and say, what the hell's going on here? You know, I'm invested in this idea of truth. And truth theoretically has its own morality. And it doesn't abide by this synthetic morality that's being brought in from one side or the other side. So does Israel, in fact, have a very powerful lobby, and do they influence American politics? Well, there was a book that was written published in 2007, and the authors were John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt, and they're professors. Okay, John Mearsheimer was a professor at the University of Chicago, which is a bastion of theoretical, liberal, and progressive thought and action. Okay, it was a New York Times bestseller. Stephen Walt was a professor at the International Relations at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. So we have the University of Chicago and Harvard, two of the highest ranking academic institutions in this country. And the book is 496 pages. It was published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. And they came to the conclusion that, yes, indeed, this country is influenced to a great extent by the Israeli lobby. So what Ilhan Omar was bringing up wasn't anything new, and in fact had been established by two very credible scholars in a New York Times bestseller from 2007. Okay? So I ask you, was what she was saying wrong? Was what she was saying wrong? Not wrong from the standpoint that we don't say that because guess what? You'll get your funding cut off. Just ask Cynthia McKinney. Cynthia McKinney was critical of Israel, and she got drummed out of her congressional spot in Georgia. Now she's doing other stuff, but you've got to toe the line here. There is a line, and if you don't toe the line, then you've got some issues politically, and we've seen this, right? So there's a really good. I'm going to put this link in the chat. And by the way, I was watching Nathan Stoltman's show last night, and Nathan had a piece on this, and his chat was unavailable, videos were unavailable, meaning that his video is not being recommended, right? Period. End of story. So I'm going to put this link in the chat room, and hopefully it'll stay up, because what I'm doing is I'm asking the question about the nature of criticism, and is it valid? And if we cannot criticize a foreign government, and we are branded with hate speech, or we're branded with this whole idea and concept of being anti-Semitic, then ultimately it's impinging upon our right to freedom of speech. Now, I suppose you could make a case that Ilhan Omar, who recanted what she had to say and apologized for what she had to say, I suppose you could make a case that as a member of Congress, she would have some kind of duty to keep her mouth shut so she could do business and take care of her quote unquote constituents. I think it's a weak case, because she's there to serve her community and the people of this country. That's what she's there to do. So if that's the case, then, do we put caps and limits on what that service is? People can be reprimanded. People can be, what she was. People can be criticized. People can be called out for their positions. And we've seen that with Ocasio-Cortez and the New Green Deal. But what it really theoretically should do is stir debate, to open the conversation. But because so many people are tied in, invested to being elected, and the relationship to AIPAC, and how AIPAC is really kind of the seal of approval, it is the Pope's kiss, right, upon your forehead, that you have to toe the line, that you cannot engage in a level of criticism with that country. You can criticize Venezuela all you want. You can criticize North Korea all you want. You can criticize Russia all you want. And those are the shadowy scapegoats in a lot of ways that we use to direct our criticism around these foreign entities that we think are, engaged in undue activity, right? But you can't criticize the one specific country that we have a very special relationship with, theoretically. And I think it's wrong. I'm on the record. I think it's wrong. And I'm going to tell you, I think it's wrong, because we need to be able to criticize any country, including our own. That if we say that we don't agree with this policy, I know a lot of people are up in arms about the government getting ready to drill for oil in the Everglades. I am too. I think they should leave the Everglades alone. I'm dead set against that. Totally against that. I think we need to be able to be critical of this country, because again, that's part of our right to be here, right? It's of the people, by the people, for the people. Although in some ways it's a complete fairy tale. We know that, at least at this point in time. So no country should be off limits, including our own, in terms of being able to be critical of what we're doing, or how we're treating people, or what policies are. And once that's off the table, once this level of criticism is stymied or eradicated, then we are less effective as a people. We're less effective as spiritual people, because truth is a really important aspect in terms of who we are and how we evolve. And there are levels of truth. I mean, when we get into the political world, we find that there are really more levels of illusion than truth, and that's the truth that we walk away with. And ultimately, we have to get to a higher level or higher order of what that truth looks like and how it manifests in our life. But we live in this world, and we're not of it. Right? When we live in this world, and political decisions impact us, who we do business impacts us, who we do business and how they do business impacts us. So I think it's important and a vital part of the process that we allow a dialogue and a discourse to take place. Now, what's really interesting is that because of this rabid reaction to what Ilhan Omar had to say and branding her tweet anti-Semitic, and it's bringing up, all these, these conspiracy theories, going all the way back to the death of Christ himself, right? What it's doing is it's basically saying, hey, look, you hit this rail and you're F-U-C-K-E-D. We've seen that again and again and again. We even saw it with somebody like Mel Gibson, who, went through the ringer. And Mel, to his credit, he's bounced back okay. In fact, The Passion Part 2 is coming, and Jim Caviezel, who's in it, says it's going to be the greatest box office hit of all time. So keep your eyes on that. That'll be very interesting. It'll stir up a lot of Mel Gibson history. That's for certain. But I think we need to be able to have a dialogue about any government that we come in contact with or does business with this country, even if it's at the risk of hitting that third rail, right? We got to have the conversation. And if we can have the conversation in responsible fashion, it can, at the very least, buttress what we're saying, right? If we stay away from hateful tropes, I think it could, at the very least, I'm trying to wrap my head around what that looks like, and I'm trying to do it right now, to be able to bring this up and have an actual look inside of this process. And it's not an easy thing to do. I will tell you that, especially based on our political climate and based on the level of censorship, both coming from the left and the right, that we are being continually forced to deal with. So let me throw that back to you guys in the chat room. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this? What do we have here? There's plenty of crude in the Permian Basin without going to Florida. Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Oh, is it Eileen's birthday? Oh, happy birthday, Eileen. Marion Kelly says, you are so right, Robert. Debate and criticism is positive. Edgardo says, First Amendment protects the right to participate in political boycotts. That's the BDS side of things, because that's getting kind of hot for Israel and Israel-related businesses and Israel-related economic initiatives. And the BDS movement to college campuses are heating up. Are there debate clubs in schools anymore? Yes, there are. Absolutely. Isla Ren says, I believe Lao Tzu said it's most beneficial to get your enemy to destroy him or herself, loosely translated from The Art of War. I'd have to check that. It sounds something like Lao Tzu would say. Charles says, Library of Congress has a list of books that you can't take out because they're listed as anti-Semitic. Ani, we are training, they are training us to censor ourselves. Isla, that is probably the most insightful comment of the day so far. Not to say that your other comments in the chat room are not insightful, but that's exactly what's happening. It's about self-censoring. Oh, if I say this, I'm going to, raise the ire of this group. Or if I say this, I'm going to be branded this kind of person. Or if I say this, my funding might be cut off. And that's a very real, that is a very, very real prospect for people who are involved in trying to forward the notion that, we can talk about things and we can have a meaningful discussion and explore the parameters of truth. Because there's an economic element that's tied to it now. And if you go too far, you're cut off. This is what's happening. And so now not only are we getting this potential for social censure and personal criticism, but there's an economic element tied into it that has clearly kept some people from being able to move forward and say what they want to say or need to say. It's very challenging. So it's really challenging. We got a little visitor today. It is not Jasper, but some of you ask about Rosie. Here she is. She's hanging out below everything. Yeah. Rosie just wants she just wants a little attention, right? Rosie's a gal. She wants just a little attention. She wants to know that, wants me to know that she's there, right? Jasper's in the doghouse. I had some shredded turkey yesterday, and I left it. I was so focused on doing a reading, I left a container of shredded turkey on my kitchen countertop, and I think I'd used about a quarter of it, and I came back and the whole thing was gone. Jasper had he mauled that little that container of turkey, and then he had the audacity. He had the audacity to, like, as I came in, go to his cat bowl and start meowing for more food. That's Jasper in a nutshell right there. Man, anyway, you got your little Rosie moment. Okay, let me check back in with you guys. See what you're saying. Yeah, Rosie's very beautiful. Eileen, on my way. Oh, Eileen's having oysters. I'm opening raw oysters for my party. 14 dozen. Wow. If you're down in Florida and you want to get some oysters, I have Eileen's address. I'll let you know where you need to go. No, I'm just kidding. That should be a great birthday party, Eileen, and I hope you enjoy it. I love oysters. I'm a big oyster fan. Ani says the Everglades have enough problems to boot. They want to frack also. Yeah, I totally agree. I agree. What, you guys have any other thoughts here about what I'm talking about today? Ilhan Omar, she's recanted. She's apologized. And it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward. I don't think she'll wind up getting drummed out or resigning as a representative if Ralph Northam can stick around and take the heat and take the fire after his really embarrassing blackface and Klan moment. Then I think that Ilhan Omar probably will remain a member of Congress. And not only that, she'll be very useful. She'll be very useful to AIPAC, and as an example of somebody whose thinking has been reformed and has a very different position on foreign events, foreign lobbies, foreign affairs. That's my 2 cents. That's what I think is going to happen. And then she'll have very positive comments written about her. But, there'll be a muzzle on her, right? So we've seen, at the very least, 2 out of the 3 of these firebrands that are coming in from the social democrat side kind of be, certainly on the Ilhan Omar side of the ledger sheet, she's been muzzled. Ocasio-Cortez a little bit because of the absolute the criticism of her absolutely ridiculous new Green Deal plan, so ridiculous that she had to take it down from her own website. So she'll be muzzled a little bit, and Tlaib, she'll look around and say, well, these two are having to walk that thin line. Maybe I need to for a while as well. There's safety in numbers, and if the numbers dwindle, there's not as much safety anymore. So I think she'll stick around. I don't think she's going to step down. She'll be very useful moving forward to the people who are really trying to make an example out of her. That's my 2 cents. Okay, we got anything else going on in the chat room? The Jewish people are so brilliant, resourceful, is why they rule the world. Well, that's an interesting comment, Charles. And it's not even a criticism. It's actually a compliment, right? I mean, that's a compliment. Is it a criticism? No, it's a compliment. Do you think this was planned to impact Trump's base of supporters? I feel a lot less supportive when we're bringing the BDS stuff and similar topics into the mix. Uh, I don't think she's a Trojan horse. I don't. Uh, but I do think that clearly it was used to galvanize support on on the side that is already invested in Trump. His approval ratings are at an all-time high now, right? The approval ratings are at an all-time high. I think it makes it harder to support Trump for people that are actually still engaged in critical thinking and looking at the big picture and putting pieces together. Now, here's what I will say about Trump. Again, we're dealing with somebody whose sun is in Gemini, and that sun is conjunct Uranus in Gemini, and his true node is in Gemini, and he was born on a lunar eclipse, okay? And the lunar eclipse is in the sign of Sagittarius. So he's going to be connected to foreign countries. That's going to be part of his astrological package, so to speak, right? That's the lunar part. He's already had 3 wives, 2 of whom are from other countries, right? Ivana and Melania, and then we have the sandwich in the middle with Marla Maples. And Marla Maples, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Marla Maples actually is Jewish. So Tiffany Trump, who is Trump's daughter, out of all of his kids, is actually the one who is Jewish through the matrilineal line. Just a factoid. But I think with Trump, you're always going to get like one side is going to be something you can't abide by and agree with. There's going to be other things he's going to do that you're going to say, well, this is great. We should have been doing this all along, like what he's doing with China and the sort of the trade, the working with China on the trade tariffs. And I mean, he's actually having an impact on China, right? So you're always going to get this with Trump. You're going to find something that feels good and you can resonate with on some level. And then you get the other side, which is something like, well, why is he doing this? Why is he doing this dance? And that's just going to be the nature of who this guy is. And ultimately, I feel like he's somebody that really nobody, like he's really big on loyalty. And I think there are people that he's loyal to. But I also feel like, and I've said this before, that you really can't trust Trump. And that's that Sun-Uranus conjunction. And even people, like now he's gone out of his way to hire one of Sheldon Adelson's buddies to be the czar of anti-Semitism. Okay. Now he's coming out against Ilhan Omar. He might do something that may, at some point, get the people on the other side who are, cheering him on because he's essentially creating these platforms and these systems in order to regulate ultimately how people think and what they say. But he might do something to piss them off as well. And out of the blue, and they're like, "Whoa, what's going on here? We thought he was doing all these things, And I'm not saying it's political expediency, but Trump is a very sharp character, and he's not dumb by any stretch, not by any stretch. He wouldn't be where he is, even if he was propped up and had all the aid from his secret societies or Goldman Sachs or the Rothschilds or Wilbur Ross or Sheldon Adelson. You've got to be kind of smart to get into that position. I mean, it's not just being able to be from a bloodline or a wealthy family. That doesn't work. If that was the case, then Dan Quayle would have been president at some point in time, right? Because he was part of a wealthy family from Indiana. He was a vice president, but he was as dim as a light bulb, and he couldn't take it to the next level. Nor was he supposed to. That wasn't part of his role. He was a payback, by the way. He was a total payback to the Bush campaign because of the amount of money that his parents donated to that campaign. Clear and simple. But you understand what I'm saying. He's not a dummy. He's actually a very, very smart guy. At the same time, he's also somebody who, at the end of the day, I would not trust him. And I've been trying for, prior to his election, getting elected and being who he is now at this point in time, I try to have as much of a kind of a middle ground and even tempered focus with Trump, and not just fall into, oh my God, we got to fall behind this guy, and have that QAnon phenomena. When one goes in, we all go one, or whatever that thing is. I've never been that way. I've always kept a part of myself outside to look at what's going on and be critical if I need to. I think it's essential. Can we be all in on something and still be critical, or still have a part of ourselves that we engage with, so that we can have a better relationship with that thing that we're all in with? Of course. I mean, think about your own relationships in life. Like, in order to be with somebody, you need to be committed and be with that person. Does that mean that, throughout the course of your relationship or your marriage, you're not going to have moments where it's like, hey, you're spending too much, right? We got to push back in that spending a little bit. Because if you don't do that, guess what happens? You're going to have these moments in your relationship. They're going to be flashpoints, and and if you don't deal with them, they're going to be problematic. And then the reverse is true, and that the person that you're engaged with, without being overtly critical, can look and say, hey, look it, you're not taking care of yourself. You're working too hard, or you're eating the wrong foods. I want you to be around. Take better care of yourself. Okay, I'll do that. Or even at a higher level, where two people look at each other and go, you know what, you're really not living up to your potential, and I know what your potential is. Let's talk about that. Let's see what we can do to further you along on either side. That's not necessarily being critical, it's being observant. And for a relationship to exist and get better, which I know absolutely everything about, of course, we have to we have to be able to have that level of being in it and committed, but at the same time be able to step back and look and observe and say, this can be better. I can be better. You can be better. We can be better. And when we lose that in our relationships, and the relationships go south, and it's not a very good prospect. And that's just one model, but it's a model that we can transpose onto a larger model. It's being in this world and not of it. Yeah, we're here, right? But there's another part of us that isn't here. And that part of us that isn't here can look down on or look into what we're doing and make really high level assessments and high level judgments for ourselves, or observations for ourselves, and even the world around us, that can be very, very helpful. What it does is it keeps us from being completely locked into the Babylon system. And the Babylon system is just saying kind of yes to everything, and not wandering or not stepping outside of that system to say, you know what, this doesn't fit, this doesn't work, and we need to address it. Now, there are times when it's appropriate and you can speak truth to power, and there are other times where it's better to be quiet. And this is, there's some times where it's best not to say anything and save your words for another time. There's an exercise that you can do to do this. And I've talked about this before. This is a concept from Castaneda, and it's called the assemblage point, which is like located right back here, right? We all have this thing called the assemblage point. And when you're congruent, the assemblage point is open, and you know you can share, and you know you can bring information to an interaction or conversation. And if the assemblage point is closed, it's probably better that you keep your mouth shut, and you can actually gauge where you are with the assemblage point, and let that be your guide in a lot of ways. Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to get at here in today's flame, and I had a bunch of stuff I was going to get into about the Yom Kippur War and Nixon and Mearsheimer and Walt, which I may save for another day. Maybe I'll save it for Friday and get into this. It's a very interesting connection, by the way, with the Yom Kippur War and Nixon at that time in 1973, who was at the apex of his impeachment process. It was so disillusioned and so out of it that Al Haig and Henry Kissinger were basically running the country, and doing that during the time of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Maybe I'll cover that on Friday. I didn't want to get into it too much today because I didn't want to get into the weeds, but it's something really worth looking at if we're going to have a bigger level discussion about what Ilhan Omar, brought up and was summarily castigated for. At the end of the day, we either have free speech or we don't. And that's just the way it is, and it's really looking more and more like we don't. And I think it's a major, I mean a major setback for not just this country, but for humanity as well. It's a major setback, because once we lose this, once we lose the ability to speak truth to power, then we are essentially, and look, we all know, like, I could sit here and make a case that we're all slaves. And it wouldn't be very hard. It just wouldn't be very hard. I could take about 5 minutes and make that case. But when we get to this Rubicon around free speech and it's shut down, then that's really the slave collar that tightens around our neck. And that's when we really get to that. We get to that fifth wall in our lives. And ultimately, I don't think it's a great thing for this country or for humanity in general, right? That's just my two cents around this. Let me see what we got in here in our chat. Okay, how country is talk. All right, there we go. It looks like our chatties have come back, our trolleys. As a socialist, multicultural religion, Europe's crumbles this year. Trump will look a great leader in comparison, no doubt. No doubt. What else we got in the chat room? Everything is up for discussion. Oh, okay. All right. Hey, listen, everybody. Have a wonderful day, including Miguel Garcia, Joaquim Silva, and the interesting Asian text that we now have in our chat room. Working on the new platform. Stay tuned. And you guys take care. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to see what's possible. Oh, by the way, Chris and Steve, here we go. Just to kind of round this off. They say Omar has criticized Saudi Arabia and his policies in Yemen, which I guess is the fourth rail. Free speech is free speech. Okay, Juana, take good care. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Ciao for now.